It was the summer after my junior year of college when everything went downhill with Brittany. We had been best friends since middle school, pretty much inseparable through all the ups and downs of teenage life. But that fateful trip to Hawaii changed everything between us in ways I never could have imagined. It had seemed like such a fun idea at the time. Brittany's parents owned a timeshare in Maui and offered for us to use it for a week before my summer internship started. We were both so excited to have one last epic adventure together before entering our final year of college. Little did I know it would lead to the unraveling of our lifelong friendship. The problem started on the very first day we arrived. As we were getting settled into the condo, Brittany announced that she had invited her new boyfriend, Marcus, to join us for the week. I was completely blindsided. We had made these Hawaii plans months ago when she was still single. Brittany insisted it would be no big deal, and that Marcus was super chill, but I had an awful feeling it was going to turn into a third wheel situation. I tried my best to stay positive, not wanting to put a dark cloud over our long-awaited vacation, but my fears were quickly realized once Marcus arrived. Brittany was all over him constantly, acting like I wasn't even there half the time. Romantic gestures and PDA that made me seriously uncomfortable as the third wheel. I got stuck doing everything by myself, going to the beach, exploring the island, eating meals alone while they were too coupled up to join. The disrespect reached a peak on our fourth night there. Brittany and Marcus had been absent most of the day, leaving me to myself as usual. When they finally returned to the condo well after midnight, I could immediately tell something was off. Marcus stormed straight to the bedroom without a word, while Brittany reeked of alcohol and looked frazzled. "We got into a crazy fight at the club," she slurred, plopping down on the couch next to me. "Marcus is pissed because I was dancing with these other guys. But I'm on vacation. I can do what I want." I sat in stunned silence as she ranted and raved about the argument, showing no remorse for her actions. Part of me wondered if she was hoping I'd take her side, but I just couldn't bring myself to enable that kind of disrespectful behavior in a relationship. Brittany must have taken my silence as judgment, because she suddenly snapped. "You're not gonna say anything? God, you're such a prude. Forget it. I don't need your lame opinion on my life." She stormed off to the bedroom, leaving me shell-shocked on the couch. Over the next couple days, the tension was palpable. Marcus had clearly decided to cut his losses, spending time making arrangements to fly home early. Brittany took out her anger on me, blaming me for ruining the vibe and taking his side. We stopped speaking entirely. The once-dream vacation ended on a sour note, with Marcus leaving after just 5 days. Brittany and I traveled home separately, not uttering a word to each other. We had been best friends for over 10 years, but that awful Hawaii trip made me realize she had become someone I could barely recognize anymore. Our friendship never recovered after that. While the Hawaii trip was the beginning of the end for Brittany and I, it was just the tip of the iceberg. Over the next year, our fractured friendship devolved into something toxic and almost unrecognizable. It started with the cold shoulder treatment after we returned from Maui. Brittany would give me this icy glare anytime we crossed paths on campus, acting as if I had committed some unforgivable sin against her. When we did grudgingly interact, it was laden with passive-aggressive jabs and snide remarks. At one point, I finally broke down and told her we needed to talk things through like adults. But Brittany was utterly unwilling, stubbornly insisting that I had chosen sides and was dead to her now. The whole situation made no sense to me. We had been best friends for over a decade, and she was willing to throw that all away over one lousy vacation fight. As the weeks went on, Brittany's pettiness towards me reached new levels of immaturity. She turned my other friends against me with lies and rumors about my disloyalty. She even tried to get me fired from my campus job by lobbying false complaints to my boss. At every turn, I found myself on the defensive against her baseless attacks and stunts. The final straw came when I started dating someone new. Brittany caught wind of it and took it as a personal affront for some reason. She started harassing me with late-night calls and texts, berating me for giving up on our friendship so easily. The messages grew increasingly unhinged, sometimes turning threateningly dark in tone. I felt utterly violated and blindsided. Everything I had valued in our friendship had been twisted into something abusive and toxic. How could someone I once considered my sister treat me with such cruelty over such small grievances? In the end, I had to block her from all contact and communication for my own well-being. Our once unbreakable bond was irreparably shattered. The worst part? I never truly got an explanation or understanding of what triggered Brittany's unraveling. Why she deciding burning our friendship to the ground was justifiable payback. Maybe some hurts and demons ran deeper than I ever realized. All I knew was that the Brittany I once loved like a sister was gone, replaced by a person I no longer recognized nor wanted in my life any longer. Just when I thought I had closed the traumatic chapter with Brittany, fate decided to drag her back into my life in the most infuriating way. It started a few months after we had cut ties. When my older brother Jack dropped a bombshell, he was dating Brittany's sister, Amber. At first, I figured it would be a fleeting fling. Jack had always been the type to chase after pretty faces without much substance. But to my horror, things got serious quickly between them. Before I knew it, the two had moved in together and were discussing marriage and kids. I pleaded with Jack to reconsider getting them entangled with Brittany's family. I revealed to him the full extent of how toxic and unhinged she had become towards me over such trivial matters. Amber's own sister treated our lifelong friendship with such little value. Who's to say she wouldn't do the same to him down the road? But Jack just waved off my concerns, insisting Amber was nothing like her crazy sister. He had fallen head over heels for her, and was convinced she was his soulmate destined for happiness. The rational part of me understood I had to be supportive of his choices. But I had a gnawing dread that this fairy tale would inevitably turn into a nightmare. My fears were validated when the unthinkable happened. Jack and Amber announced they were expecting a baby just 6 months into dating. While I put on a brave face and fake smile for them, inside I was in utter panic mode. A kid being tied to potential future drama with the unhinged Brittany? No thanks. As Amber's pregnancy progressed, the drama started trickling in, just as I had feared. There were constant bickering and fights between Amber and Brittany about things like baby names, nursery designs, shower plans. She somehow managed to make everything about her ownership over the unborn child. Then the hugely emotional labor scenes, where Brittany violently shoved her way into the delivery room, igniting an outrageous scene until security had to intervene. I watched in horror as this woman I once loved unleashed her hateful banshee screams, behavior I never imagined she was capable of just years prior. When Jack and Amber tried to set firm boundaries, limiting Brittany's time with the newborn due to her unhinged behavior, she responded by attempting to turn the entire family against my brother. She waged a vicious smear campaign, spreading vile lies, and trying to damage his reputation for the sake of her own vengeance. It was a cycle that only continued repeating the minute Jack and Amber would try to calmly establish healthy relationships with boundaries. Brittany would rain hellfire down on them with new twisted machinations. Family events became battlegrounds. Holiday gatherings turned into personal vendettas against them. Watching the once loving family I had embraced as my own become so disgustingly toxic was one of the hardest things I've ever had to endure. Jack's misguided marriage to Amber had empowered the worst impulses of her spiteful, unforgivable sister back into my life. As the years passed with no resolution in sight, I realized I had to make the difficult decision to cut off most contact with them in order to preserve my own peace and sanity. For a few years after cutting ties, I was able to maintain a healthy distance and separate myself from the toxic situation with Brittany and her family. Jack and Amber had a second child during that span, but I politely declined any invitations to be involved, citing my need for space and boundaries. It was a difficult but necessary call. However, dark clouds began brewing again when whispers started circulating that Jack and Amber's marriage was growing seriously strained. Apparently, Brittany had only grown more emboldened and manipulative in inserting herself into their family affairs over time. From what I could piece together, she was constantly undermining Amber as a parent, overstepping with the children behind her back. She flooded Jack with nasty messages about what an inadequate husband and provider he was. No corner of their lives was left unsabotaged by her toxic presence. Things hit a boiling point when Jack made the decision to separate from Amber and file for divorce after one particularly explosive altercation where Brittany launched a full-blown smear campaign against Jack, portraying him as an abusive monster unfit to be around his own kids in an attempt to strip him of custody rights. She even attempted turning his own parents against their son with vicious lies and manufactured evidence. Meanwhile, Amber increasingly leaned on her sister as an influence, becoming just as embittered and vindictive towards Jack. She used the kids as cruel leverage, punishing Jack by blocking visitation visits over minor disagreements. The courtroom battle turned epically ugly in ways I never could have imagined from the once happy couple. As the controversies and conflicts continued escalating, the collateral damage kept spreading into our greater family circle. Long-buried resentments and grievances were dredged up among all the siblings and relatives. Everyone was forced to pick a side in this civil war, despite most wanting no part of it. At the center remained the instigating black hole that was Brittany. She maneuvered the entire chaotic chessboard with chilling sociopathic skill. No low was too low, no exploitation of loved ones went too far, as long as it fed her ravenous hunger for vengeance and control. More than once, I found myself receiving late-night calls and messages from her, desperately attempting to gaslight me into rejoining her narrative of victimhood. When I refused to engage, the threats and harassment would escalate until I was forced to block communication again. It was like batting a deranged hornet's nest constantly. Looking back, I realized how ill-equipped I was to deal with someone whose psychology ran that toxically disordered. While our childhood friendship had been beautifully innocent, the adult Brittany operated entirely without a conscience. She simply could not conceive how much carnage she inflicted on those she claimed to love most. Restraining orders, court mandates, and police intervention became a dizzying norm in all our lives. Keeping safe distances to shield from her destructive spheres of influence was the only way to preserve mental stability. Our once close families disintegrated into a fractured web of haunted strangers, all tracing our veins back to that same poisoned root. It started with the anonymous letters and emails to Jack's employer, a prestigious law firm. Vile accusations of workplace misconduct, unethical behavior, doctored evidence attempting to paint him as a threat. While the firm initially tried to remain impartial, the constant barrage of harassment slowly began taking its toll. Then came the online smear campaign plastering salacious lies and libelous claims across review websites, social media, and any public forum that could host Brittany's vengeful agenda. It grew into a cancerous swarm that rapidly tarnished Jack's reputation in professional circles. Unable to prove she was the mastermind behind it all, Jack was rendered powerless as Brittany's scorched earth tactics began stripping him of career prospects and income sources. He went from an upwardly mobile rising star at the law firm to an outcast seen as a liability that needed to be cut loose. The psychological warfare and financial stress began crippling Jack from every angle. Brittany's rampage left him struggling to make rent or pay child support to Amber, let alone fund his astronomical legal fees from their ongoing custody case. She had systematically dismantled nearly every facet of his life. In the midst of it all, I too got caught in Brittany's crosshairs when I tried to intervene and reason with her. I'll never forget the chilling voicemail she left me after sending a stern letter to Amber about her sister's unhinged conduct. "You're lucky we were once friends, because that's the only thing protecting you right now. Stay out of my business, or I'll make sure you end up just as destitute and alone as Jack. Don't think I don't have that power." Those words were embodied in her actions quickly thereafter. Suddenly, I began receiving a barrage of disturbing, vulgar, and threatening messages across all my communication platforms. My social media was spammed with deplorable comments and doctored images. At work, my boss received an alarming anonymous call claiming I was an insider threat that required monitoring. The onslaught persisted for weeks until I was a shell of myself, paranoid, anxious, overwhelmed by the torment Brittany was inflicting. My relationships and health both suffered tremendously. I found myself too rattled to even leave my apartment most days out of fear of her next disruptive stunt. When I finally emerged to take legal action and seek a restraining order, it was like jogging through a minefield set by Brittany. She had thoroughly poisoned every well, leveraged every vulnerability she could find in my personal life to maximize the harassment's impact. I felt like her utterly disposable target, a sobering reminder that she cared nothing for our once profound bond. By the time the dust settled, the devastation she inflicted was life-alteringly substantial: jobs lost, reputations maligned, finances gutted, counseling needed. All part of her mission to wage scorched earth vengeance, no matter how many innocent lives were destroyed as collateral. To this day, Brittany has zero accountability or remorse over the havoc she single-handedly triggered across our families. The psychological scars she inflicted may never fully heal. In her mind, she's always been the victim, a delusion that provided endless justification for the sickest of treacheries. The years have passed, but the trauma Brittany inflicted still casts a long shadow. Jack was eventually able to rebuild his career after the vicious sabotage, though the financial toll set him back significantly. The custody situation with his kids remains a fragile detente, a cold war of uneasy visitation schedules and co-parenting across two embittered camps. As for me, I've had to live with the psychological scars of Brittany's deranged fixation. The threats, harassment, and angst she battered me with took years of therapy to overcome. Even now, I remain hypervigilant about maintaining clear boundaries and distance from that vortex of toxicity. The hardest part has been watching the family I once considered my own crumble into an unrecognizable husk. What were once jovial holiday gatherings are now somber affairs, haunted by ghosts of those we've lost to Brittany's indelible damage. A hollow feeling endures with each passing year, mourning the death of what could have been. In the end, Brittany's true victim was herself, a troubled soul so consumed by vengeance that she alienated and detonated every positive force in her vicinity. She'll never experience the joy of family, the warmth of lasting friendships, the peace of an untroubled mind. Those pleasures are restricted only to people capable of empathy and love. For Brittany, life's journey has consisted of an endless series of self-inflicted punishments and destruction. A doomed path where one secures their own psychological imprisonment with every betrayal and atrocity committed. While she took immense delight in triumphing over each perceived enemy, her greatest opponent was the darkness within herself all along. As for me, I've learned that sometimes death isn't just a cessation of life, but the removal of a toxic presence that was stealing your very soul. My friend of so many years had to die in order for me to live authentically once more. It was an agonizing loss, but also a necessary rebirth into finding wholeness again.